Good morning, Year 4. How are you? And welcome to today's PDW session. Today's session is going to be all about how you can resolve conflicts and looking at the different strategies for how you can do that. And by the end of this session, you will be able to explain the positive resolution techniques that you can use to solve disputes and arguments. And you will also be able to identify how your support network, how your VIPs can support your conflict resolutions too. So, thinking about some of the big questions today then, the first question is, how and why do people fall out with their friends? And secondly, what can we do when this happens? So pause the video, how and why might you fall out with your friends? And what can you do when this happens? Pause the video now and have a think. Okay, hopefully you've thought of lots of ideas there. You might fall out with your friends when you have a disagreement. You might fall out with your friends when you don't want to share something with them, or when you might be in a bit of a bad mood yourself. Now we're going to explore today what we can do when this happens. Now, we've mentioned some times when you might fall out with your friends, but you might fall out with your friends like when you both want the same thing, but you can't have it at once. When you have different opinions. When you want to do different things, if someone else upsets us and that affects our mood, when you have different ideas about something, and if we upset someone else. So most of these things are talking about differences that people have that might mean that you might fall out with someone else. But thinking about the reasons that are highlighted in pink boxes there, can you think of any other reasons why children might fall out with their friends? Pause the video and have a think. Maybe you've thought of lots of other reasons there. Now I'm going to talk you through some positive resolution techniques. There are 4 of them that you can do maybe next time you might have an argument with your friend, because remember, it's completely normal to have conflicts with friendships because a good friendship is never perfect all the time. But I'm going to talk you through some positive resolution techniques that might help you the next time you get in some conflict with your friend, if you do. So the first technique is with a game. So if you're trying to decide some things, for example, who should be first in line, which often happens when we're on our way back into the classroom after break, who gets to sit in a certain place or whose turn it is next in the game, you can use a game to decide, such as rock, paper, scissors. So if you don't know that game, you can go 1, 2, 3, and then you either choose rock, paper or scissors. So if one of you chooses rock and scissors, that person wins, and vice versa. You probably know how to play that game. But playing games to resolve a falling out is really, really useful because it means that that issue is not going to get any worse and that you don't need to try and resolve it yourself in an angry way. Because sometimes we can get a bit angry when we're about to have a falling out with someone. But next time, if you can't decide what game you're going to play, or what you're going to do next, or who's going to do this, you can decide with rock, paper, scissors, because then it's fair. And then whoever hasn't done it, whoever's already done it, whoever hasn't done it can do it next. And then whoever hasn't done it, do it next. So you take it in turns. And that's a really fair way, and actually really good way to stop a falling out. The second way is this concept of I messages. So where you're trying to explain your thoughts and feelings with a sentence that starts with I. For example, thinking of the example we had last week about Billy, instead of saying that Billy won't play with me, instead start your sentence with I. I feel sad when you don't play with me. Getting your emotions involved is really, really important because then that person really understands how you're feeling. It makes them think twice. Think about our persuasive writing when we have to include that emotive language. It's the same in person. When we include that emotive language by saying our thoughts and feelings, it helps the other person to really understand how we are feeling. So instead of saying, Billy won't play with me, instead, I feel quite sad when you don't play with me. It makes me feel quite hurt. A third positive resolution technique is this idea of a peace path. So following a path of stepping stone ideas help to resolve the falling out. And the first path is that talking about your feelings. I feel sad, alone, unhappy. When? What makes you feel sad? Tell that person. Then you want to say, I would feel better if you did play with me or you did take it in turns. And then you follow the next stepping stone as I need I need you to consider my feelings, please. I need you to make sure that this game is fair, that we are doing things fairly. And then finally, next time, we will make sure that we do take it in turns. Next time, we'll make sure that it's your go next. And that can really help to resolve the falling out in a really kind and friendly way. Because you've considered their feelings, you've considered your own, and you've vocalised that too, which is fantastic. The final positive resolution technique is called conflict managers. So think of those children in the class that maybe are really, know what to say and are there to support you when you have a falling out with someone. So if you have a falling out with someone, think, who would that child be that would be there to support me? Who is my really good friend that can support me if I fall out with someone? Because then if you fall out with someone different, this child who's your conflict manager can remind you of the positive resolution techniques and make sure that your falling out is resolved. Now, can you remember the 4 positive resolution techniques? Pause the video and have a think. Did you manage to remember them? Did you manage to remember the stepping stones? Did you manage to remember the conflict managers? Did you manage to remember playing a game? And did you manage to remember the I message, making sure you convey your feelings? Now we're going to think of this idea of a perfect world and whether or not it really exists. So I want you to imagine a world where everyone gets on all the time. No one ever falls out. How would everyone need to be in order for there to never, ever be a falling out? Have a think about whether you believe this would actually work and what would need to happen if this would work. Is there such thing as a perfect world? Pause the video and have a think. I think you're absolutely right that actually there is no such thing as a perfect world. As I mentioned earlier, it's really healthy in a friendship for you to sometimes have disagreements because you can't always have agreements on everything. You can't always be this perfect friendship. But what is important that you know how to deal with that and that you don't start having that conflict about it. Now we're going to think about the fact that some of the disputes can be resolved by the people who have fallen out, which is what we've considered throughout this lesson so far, that actually sometimes the 2 people in the disagreement can sort it out there and then, which is what I try and tell you, don't I? But sometimes we do need some support from others to help the sorting out. And this might be because the falling out might be quite serious. This might be because one of the people is very upset or they feel very angry. And I want you to imagine that the people involved in a falling out have tried all of the positive resolution techniques, but they haven't resolved all the issues. So your first task today is to have a look at the falling out scenario cards that you have been given in your resource pack. Read them, and I want you to think about whether a support network, one of your VIPs, could help to stop the falling out from happening or help to resolve it, and who could help. So you're going to read these scenario cards. Make sure you understand the characters involved. On your sheet, they're labelled 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've given you a copy of the positive resolution techniques as well, just so you want to have a look at them and see how maybe you could use them when we're back to school. And what I want you to do is, for each of the scenarios, so as I said, they're labelled 1, 2, 3, and 4 for you. I want you to think which of your very important people could help. Might it be a teacher, a family member, a friend, a relative? Then you're going to write it here. And then you're going to consider how could this falling out be resolved. So you might start thinking, well, actually, they could use one of these positive resolution techniques. But I want you to imagine that they've already tried to use those positive resolution techniques and it doesn't work anymore. So what can they do now to resolve this conflict? Okay, and I know it says here, think about the positive resolution techniques, but now I want you to imagine that they've already tried them. They don't work. What do they do next? And that is your task for today. A final plenary here then, thinking about the following questions. Now, can you answer these questions? How and why do people fall out with their friends? And what can we do when this happens? Pause the video and have a think. Okay, perhaps you've got some fantastic ideas there, and hopefully you've learnt lots, and maybe your answers have changed a lot from the beginning of the lesson. I want to ask you a question. Do you have any new ideas for how we could resolve disputes? Perhaps you could bring them to the classroom with you on Monday so that we can talk through them together. Okay. Have a lovely rest of your day. I hope you enjoy the task today, and I will see you in our next lesson. Goodbye, Year 4.